At the end of your life, what will be your legacy? What will you leave behind for future generations? For the world, join the World Messenger, Izabela Lundberg, each week as she brings you a new distinguished guest from the business, sports, or entertainment world to share their success, their struggles, and their lessons. They will share their insights into current hot topics that affect everyone. Izabela facilitates an intimate, vulnerable environment to find the true value of humanity and real leadership. Are you ready for your legacy? The legacy that matters?
Hello, my beautiful friends. It's Izabela Lundberg here, the World Messenger, and I am inviting you for another epic episode of Legacy Leader Show. I'm super thrilled to share the world message from amazing, exceptional human being that is leading authenticity with harmony and figured out the ways through her, not only education, but practical application, how to really have a difficult conversation. She is the conversation game changer. And I can't tell you how much of her extraordinary work is changing dynamics around the conversations to produce global impact. She's navigating communication through gender dynamics and through intelligence. She is also focusing on something that is absolutely necessary, which is positive masculinity. She's also author, anthropologist, and has a doctorate in it. Oh my goodness. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Dr. Pauline Crawford. Pauline, how are you? Welcome.
Oh, it is so wonderful to be here, Izabela. I'm so excited to be here. I love every minute of my life, and I think that's what we need to encourage human beings everywhere in the world to be. And my dream is to create authentic harmony across the whole world. Can you imagine it if everybody was in their families and their communities and at work, and whether they're leading big deals or they're creating policies, they actually do it in harmony, because they understand that there's an uplift in harmony, which there isn't in strife and arguments. I just don't understand why we have to have so many arguments. So that's my internal passion, is to have a world of harmony for myself, but also for men and women in every single culture of the world. Because the one thing we can be sure of, and I've lived in many different places in the world, people are people, and we all work in actually very simple ways.
I love what you just said, and all of those, this harmonious incidents or situations that we're witnessing and looking right now, either from individual contributor or from groups, usually come from very specific place. And we know what that place is, and we're going to tackle that.
Yes.
But I love that you dedicate your life and work not only to be a lifelong learner, but also to share the wisdom from different parts of the world and create gorgeous tapestry of that beautiful dynamic through this intelligence that just flows. And for everybody watching and listening, you are for a very special treat in this episode of Legacy Leader Show, because what we're doing is we're bringing wisdom, collective wisdom around the world, and being messengers today to share the message back to the world. Yes. So back to that one thing that so many don't even recognize, which is this profound, unfortunately, fear factor. Could you please share your perspective on that?
Well, we do know from many eminent psychologists, and I'm not a psychologist, but there are only two base emotions in the world, love and fear. And I think the majority of people don't actually realize that. And you'll say it to them and they go, what do you mean? Yes, there's loads of other emotions that we can talk about. There's hate and there's anger and there's passion and there's joy, but they all come from love and fear. So if we see that as the dark and the light, we've all got that within us. So what makes us get into a space of fear, which turns into hate and turns into vitriol, can turn into narcissism, it can turn into being horrible to people and trying to control them. I don't know where it comes from for anybody listening, but we know it's there. So the only person we can address is ourselves. Very often we blame other people. Well, you know, I'm a bad person because I lived in a terrible situation when I was a kid, or I had this drama, I was caught in war, or whatever it is. And there's any number of things that people, it could be in the boardroom, you know, it could be in the team where everybody seems to hate me. And we start blaming. As soon as we start blaming or shaming other people, we're into fear. So ownership is really important here. So I have a very simple acronym, which is called a CORE. What's at the core of all this? So let's take this. First is C, is choice. What am I choosing to be and do? Am I actually looking around and understanding that? And I have to understand me first. So the O is ownership. What do I know about myself? Well, hopefully you were with yourself all your life. It's a matter of looking in the mirror, literally. I've been an image consultant in my life and literally shown people how to see themselves in the way they present their clothes. But it's much more than that. It's how do you learn what's inside? And where does that, yes, where's your history? But don't stay in your history. You know, don't stay in the grief that happened when you were a kid, or the people at school were so horrible to me, or oh, I failed at college, so my parents hate me. You know, there are a number of things we can think of. But the R is responsibility. And this is a key thing for me, is now, today, in a world which is very troubled and very frightening on too many levels for too many people, how do we take responsibility for myself and not go external and start blaming? Because the E is energy. And if we're going to create our energy, we need to go through that path. So love and fear, getting to love ourselves. And what's interesting here is, and I know this from some of my clients, you know, especially, dare I say, men, because I work with men and women, but men will say, oh, that sounds very egotistical. But loving yourself is actually being self-caring. And women also can be very bad at that. Sometimes they get very defensive. Oh, well, I'm not important, so I can't take care of myself. Now, I reckon everybody has heard about what you do on an aeroplane. You put the mask on yourself before you help somebody else. It's no good if you're choking to death. You can't help anybody else. So this idea of self-evaluation, self-development, self-love, self-care, self-esteem, actually, let's make it very simple. There's only love and fear. So do you want to fear yourself, or do you want to love yourself? So if we can honestly, without anybody else in the room, say, well, actually, yeah, I'd quite like to be in a good place. That's the first step. Because when we look at collective love and collective fear, if we don't know ourselves, it's going to be very difficult to understand how we rattle around that collective energy. So we've got to see ourselves, we've got to see our relationships, and we've got to see the collective. And not to blame the external is to take ownership here. And, you know, many people have had terrible traumas in their lives. I'm not going to deny that. I've been very blessed in my life to not have traumas and have a very amazing, loving upbringing. And yes, I've had times when things have not been so good, but I haven't had to deal with traumas. But even with a trauma, you can say, okay, I had that, I experienced it, I take responsibility. Do I want to stay in it or move? And actually, by not making a choice, you're making a choice.
Yes, so true.
And, you know, and having said all that, it should be simple to change what's going on in the world. But I think we're very bound at the moment by the collective unwisdom. And a lot of that, I think we need to talk about is, why do people feel they have to control somebody else?
That is deep and profound. And why is this happening? We can have a million answers and all of them would be correct. But again, all of them come and stem from that level of insecurity and need for control, doesn't it?
Well, that's right, because in fact, when you're insecure, you may want to try and control things. And when you're in control, you might get over controlling. Now, what I study with my work with gender dynamics intelligence, there are different characters out there. And to try and make that simple, we look at, what are men like, what are women like, what's masculine energy like, and what's feminine energy like, and how does that come together in a circle? And so if anything is not good, I'm going to call it fear-based, and it's toxic. So we get a lot of people talking about, toxic masculinity, or toxic this and that, toxic femininity. Actually, it's just toxic. It's like bad behavior.
We need to gender label, it's just toxicity that is affecting. And do you mind telling a little bit more actually exactly about that? Because I'm hearing and seeing people quickly labeling so that they project issues on other people.
Yes.
And pull back and don't take, as you just mentioned earlier, responsibility and accountability and what role they play.
I think we've grown up in the last century, if dare I say the last several centuries, in a world that's been designed by men. And I say that with love, because that's what happened. Men built the pyramids, built the buildings, built the roads, women had the babies. Let's go right back to basics. But essentially this century, we've grown into intelligence. We have even now social intelligence, AI intelligence, all sorts of intelligence. But, even 100 years ago, this world was incredibly different. People were plowing the fields, so we've got to take that into consideration. So the structures that occurred are very linear, and they're very structured, and they're very, there are a lot of controls put in. So some controls are really useful. So, I know that I have to ride on a certain side of the road, otherwise I hit another car. That's a sensible control function. So when we look at how business and society and community has been created on that very straight line grid. If you add in fluidity and, dare I say, the feminine energy, the yin energy, which nature gives us. Nature is very fluid, it flows together. It grows or it doesn't grow. If you feed the plants, they grow. If you don't, they die. It's actually a very simple, complex situation, but it's very linear and it's very fluid. It's straight lines and curves, it's boxes and circles. And what I'm seeing is that we've moved out of a world that's very controlled by straight lines, because we locked down in COVID, we stopped the systems. We've now got hybrid working or home working, or women as entrepreneurs, and not just at home, AI changing our lives. There's so much changing which is fluid. We're struggling to understand the controls that were there before. And majority of those were controlled by men, and very linear, logical, minded men. So we do still have that powerful authority saying, no, this is the way to go. And the rest of us going, no, we want to do something different. And the unknown is very scary for people. And I think this is where we've got a battle between, as Simon Sinek talks about, the finite and the infinite. I know what I'm doing, this is the way it is. And this, well, no, the new and the unknown might actually be better.
Yes.
And one of the things that I've been studying and talking to you about is that women see the world differently to men. Yes. And as we're half of the world, and that's a number, 46.59% of the world is female, 3.9 billion women in the world, 2.2 billion of those are mothers. And you just think about that. Women know what that means. I don't think that men know what that means. So for men, I understand them, and this is not all men, obviously, but I understand why men are stunned by the fact that we might actually be able to create something better and new and integrate masculinity and femininity. And one of the key factors is removing toxicity, because we know the outcome of toxic behavior, and whether that's predicated by men or by all of us, but let's just say what it is. But violence against women and girls, wars, famine, all sorts of things that have been controlled by the male making of the world to be profit-driven and greed-driven and corruption-driven. And I'm not saying that women are not greedy or corrupt. Certainly there's toxic behavior across the board. But if we said we want a world without toxicity, then we need to address what is the replacement. And that's where I come in with authentic harmony. And, you know, one of the challenges I have at the moment is that there's a huge focus on violence against women and girls, a huge focus on the empowerment of women, but they are not necessarily addressing what we could have differently and what would be owned by men. Because I don't think men ever wanted equality, and that's why we've always had a battle for it.
Because they don't know what's the alternative and what that alternative will do to them, to their ego, to their positioning, to their power, right? Yes. And when we seek the power, we seek power. When we see the power, we seek it when we fear it. And yes. We know, and then again, create through that all that toxicity. So do you mind? Oh my God, this is so deep and profound, yet so simple. So for everybody watching and listening, we are deep diving now truly to understand toxicity. We're seeing toxicity demonstrated in aggressive and passive aggressive or anything in between ways. Yes. A lot of times the labels come flying everywhere, and a lot of times we label or see labeling of each other, but deep down we're also missing to reassess and understand what all that means. Do you mind spelling a little bit of that so that people can really also understand harmony? What is the alternative and what that looks like, please?
Well, if the way I look at it is that toxicity causes damage. So that could be anything from a knife being stabbed into a body, a rape, war, obviously, but it could also be that insidious, nasty comment, that put down, that taking somebody out. Oh, you know, what do they think they are? You know, we know that those things happen when we gossip maliciously, when we say, you know, oh, they shouldn't think, they shouldn't be doing that, you know. Potentially we do that with our children even, you know. Parenting is one of the most difficult jobs in the world. I know that, you know, and we don't have lessons in it often. We trust the education system, and that's another whole potential toxicity, but toxicity damages. So if something's going to damage, it's not good. So if we go back to nature, you know, if we want to have a lovely forest, we don't go and mistreat the trees or chop them down or just not feed them. So let's be sensible. Human beings have emotions. We're very, we have a soul, we have emotions, we have a heart as well as a brain. But to be honest, the world of the last century plus has been created by the brain. You know, it's done on very logical lines. So if we're going to shift there and remove toxicity, we need to replace it with something which is, in my terms, harmonious. That's the word I've used. We could use the word joyful, happy, you know, healthy. It's what is the plus side of not damaging. And one of the things we know psychologically is that when we say the negative word, we don't hear the negative word. So this is the challenge with the whole campaign for Stop Violence Against Women and Girls. It's focused on violence against women and girls. When we focus on we must empower women, that's the only way forward. We're missing all the other bits, but especially that one, stop violence, which we do need to do, but we're focusing on violence. So how about start harmony? And this is why I've been keynoting on goodbye equality, hello harmony. I'm not decrying equality at all. There were lots and lots of extremely good things that we have done in the last 100 years, the vote, the positions in business, but we need to go further. We know that, for instance, women in business make a huge difference to profit and performance, but it's a battle if we keep on working on the old landscape. So we don't go as far forward as we could do. So this is the whole thing and the other thing I was going to suggest is look at it as power. We have this thing about power, but the power grid of the world, we need electricity to feed us. So electricity works. We plug something in the wall and it works. How about plugging into each other as human beings, that we have a human power grid, and men and women of different generations, different diversities, we are the elements of the human power grid. And we need to step into that space and say, wow, we can actually power the whole world based on loving intentions, emotional integrity, and yes, operational excellence, obviously, but we're not saying throw out the past. What I'm saying is let's integrate it into something which is bringing all the talents of the world together. And if we could stand in the space of not controlling other people, we can still lead them, we can still manage them, we can still invite them to the party, but we're not controlling them. We're not saying, you must do this or else. To my mind, that's toxic.
I love that description, and I'm so glad we took a little bit of extra time so that everybody can understand. And I love how you simplify that so that we all can relate. Anything that is damaging to yourself or to another being or to the nature is toxicity. And we have opportunity to shift and change the script and self-analyze, self-assess, but also assess our environment. Or if we see or notice something, question why is happening, where this is coming from, because a lot of times, sometimes people are not even aware of, right? Because we're so much on our pilot and we absorbed in behavior from home or school or environment, and cave in with that, even recognizing that we're now carrying the elements of toxicity. So now on the flip side, you are creating something that brings harmony, that brings this beautiful flavor of humanity. So do you mind giving us what that looks like in your world through your amazing workshops, relationships, and everything that you do and your essence, because obviously it's working and I cannot wait for everybody to hear.
Well, it's what I call magical conversations, and you create it in a wisdom circle. So if I could, I would change every single square boardroom into a round table. I think King Arthur had absolutely the right idea. But when you sit in a circle and you have three very simple rules, so it might sound like I'm controlling, but these are rules that make sense to me. The first rule is no judgment. So you've got to know yourself. You remember core, you've got to know yourself, take responsibility. When you sit in the circle, you don't need your ego. You just need your soul and your experience and your intention to share. So there's no judgment. So depending on the topic in the middle of the room, it could be leadership, it could be love, it could be client services. It can be very constructive. But what you're doing is you're coming in with your experience, not your judgment. You're coming in with your passion, not your anger. And you're coming in with your willingness to just listen and watch and allow it to grow. So the third rule is no coercion. So that's taking that control out in the time that you're having this event. So it may not be forever. We still need to take actions. I'm not denying that. We still need KPIs or whatever, but we're allowing to seed the ground by sharing. So I run these with my clients. And what happens is that when people step into them, especially people who don't normally like conversation, they realize that it's different because they don't have to bring their ego and they've already got their experience in the back of their backpack. So I'm not stretching them to find out something they don't know. I mean, we all go searching on Google to find out anything we know now anyway, but you come with your experience and you look at the topic and you say, well, in my experience of leadership, I love da 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 da. You'll share from that side. What happens? It takes a bit of time for some people, but in time, people relax. And actually, you can see it in their body. They go, oh, I don't have to be Mr. Boss. I don't have to be the lady from client services. I don't have to be sitting at my desk. Oh, and actually, you have no hierarchy in the circle.
Yes.
So when I do this, especially when I do this with culture change, you deliberately mix up all the levels, but when they're in the circle, there's no level. It's not boss and follower. It's just Izabela, Pauline, Tom, Dick, Harry. It's wonderful to watch, because people to start with are a bit defensive, and they kind of they're so used to being told what to do or having to tell other people. You put them in that space, it opens up this almost like this vortex in their body, and they go, oh, actually I can say something, and nobody's allowed nobody's allowed to take over the subject. So it's not as if there's a speaker, it's a flow, and as a facilitator you make sure that it does flow. And the interesting thing is, people always say, what happens if somebody gets angry or opinionated? But what you do as a facilitator is you quickly pause and say, well, actually, Tom, you're kind of stretching the rules here. As you remember, it's no judgment, no anger, no coercion. And you very calmly say that. And, you know, we'd love you to stay, but we need you to honor the rules. Is that okay? If not, we're okay if you leave. And you just do it literally with that kind of presence, and nobody defends him or anything. Everybody in the circle stays in that space. And I can guarantee you 99% of the time that person will stay. Because they've and what's important as well is they've never had that opportunity to be in that space. And that's the world that we're shifting, because the world has been so critical. You go to school and you get this, and then you go to work and you get this, that actually people really, really adjust to it quickly. And when they know their archetype, when they know what kind of man or what kind of women are sitting in their circle, it's even more fun. So I'm not going to go into all the detail of my programs. Of course, I want everybody to come to them. But the thing to remember is, speak with no judgment, come with your experience. If somebody says something that's totally different to what you think, just pause and say, wow, it's an interesting perspective. It's not mine, but it's an interesting perspective. You can be that honorable.
That is so powerful. And I absolutely love it. As you know, both of us are playing quite a bit in corporate worlds, right? And seeing a lot of things that are now affecting millions and millions of people, because exactly what is not happening, which is that beautiful, inclusive conversation, no communication, in essence, with at least clearly applying rules or identifying what the rules are, and the level of inclusiveness, right? That really gains, because everybody learns. Every single person learns something new or different, either about themselves or their peers or their colleagues in general, but also about the work. And as a result, we can make what? Better choices, better decisions, right?
Well, also the unknown comes in, because in my experience, you suddenly hear something and you think, hey, I never thought about it that way. And you might need to go and think about it. We know that women enter conversation differently to men, and some people are more introvert, some people are more extrovert. But as long as you're in that space, it truly is a sacred space. It bubbles with a lovely energy of safety, but also creative energy. And I just love it, because people always say you can leave your ego outside the door, and maybe you don't need to pick it up when you go outside.
So rich and so amazing. So with beautiful integration of circle, obviously creating the harmony. And I love that you touched a little bit about also dealing with the challenging situations. Both of us had quite a bit of experience dealing with very challenging types of personalities that are often labeled and known as narcissist.
Yes.
And very destructive narcissistic behavior. Awareness around it, knowing how, and yet still to move the needle in positive direction. Do you mind sharing a little bit, how do you move the needle in right direction in those circumstances, in those situations? Because unfortunately, we know a lot of those guys have a lot of power and they're in powerful positions. and also very powerful attitudes.
Yes, and what I'm going to say might sound to some people like a cop-out, but I think we embrace them almost with that statement of, that's an interesting proposal or interesting situation. It's not for me. Thank you. And then walk away very carefully, and then do work on yourself to make sure you're grounded. A true narcissist won't want to be in the magical conversation. They won't want to be in a wisdom. But I guess you anything, if we grow the groundswell of this, they don't want to miss out. And I know examples of this, especially when you're looking at the whole issue of men and women. There was an example of a major company where one big department, the guy at the top saw all this evidence about men and women working together being a good thing. So he did it by decision more than emotion. He just started putting women into pole position, making teams, but he wouldn't tell anybody outside of his department. And his figures got better and better. And the other department heads were going, excuse me, what's going on? What are you doing? And he wouldn't tell them till he'd totally proven it. And this is quite a male thing. I think it took a couple of years. So when he got it really proven, and everybody was said, and then he shared the story because that was his glory. I don't mind that. I think, we have to meet people where they're at. And the narcissists are going to control our world and make nasty decisions and fire people, all the things that the only way we could turn that right is to get into a fight with him or her. And I don't think that we should fight, as women especially, and as good wise men. We don't need to fight. We can stand strong. So I believe that we deal with them by building the groundswell of those people who are willing to say, hey, this is not just a good idea for me, it's a good idea for this company. Yes. This is a way that we can actually accelerate. Happy employees make happy customers. That's proven over and over again. It's proved that women have great management skills. There's loads of proof. So for the narcissist who's standing there being very controlling, he's going to lose out. Well, I don't want to go into a battle with him. If I meet him head on, I'm just going to be very calm. And I'll give you an example. I actually sat opposite one in a very brief meeting one day, and he was barking at me, literally. I'm this, I'm that, I'm like that. And I was drinking my cup of tea. And he said, so what do you think, Pauline? And he was talking about his brilliance at this program I was on. So I started to say something which sounded a bit tangential. I was talking about my company. I said, well, Corporate Heart International, we might, and he stopped me literally. And he went, we're not having a conversation, Pauline, I'm talking at you. I don't think you know who I am. So this is a wonderful narcissist. So I was very calm. I just put my cup of tea down and I said, your program's actually brilliant. It had really good content. So I could say that with honesty. I said, whether or not we work with you will depend on my client, actually. And then I just stopped talking. I wasn't angry. I just drank my tea. I kept good eye contact. I wasn't committing myself to anything. I was honest about what I saw, but I didn't say, I honestly think you're something very nasty. What he did was he stood up and very friendly, grasped my hand with a good handshake and said, oh, good, I think we understand each other.
Wow.
And when he walked out, it was such an aha moment for me because I thought, wow, I do understand you. And that was all you wanted. You wanted to be able to say who you were, tell me your brilliance, and expect that maybe in somewhere there might be some work opportunity. And I'd made the decision, I'll never work with you. But that's okay. I don't have to go into a Q&A and a debate about it. So no, not all situations will be where you can walk away, but we don't need to be put down by anybody. And his words were absolutely brilliant because he actually said, I'm not having a conversation with you.
Wow, wow, wow. Brilliantly handled. And as you said, it's not always easy. But when we're dealing with that distraction and toxicity and all of these issues, obviously you know how to navigate them extremely well. Do you mind sharing for our audience and everybody watching and listening, what do you do when you face with, when is that directed at you, when you feel deep down, this is not true, I know who I am, this is projection on their own insecurities and fears, but in a way you still have a kindness and compassion towards that person or that situation? What would you suggest and recommend when you don't necessarily have choice, that you can just simply, avoid it, but you have to deal it either in a working environment or even at home? Because right now we're seeing a lot of those types of behaviors that are really breaking down so many people and so many people lives.
Well, that's right. And I think the home situation over COVID has been extremely challenging for some people. It's been very enlightening for some families, but it has caused that pressure cooker. So if you know what a pressure cooker is like, it's again, it comes down to that core. What choice do I make in any moment? And it's a version of that. Well, that's an interesting perspective. It's like, this is my view. This is how I see this. Make some very clear statements, but don't stay into an argument. So what I mean by that is, make a clear statement. I'm not happy with this situation. It doesn't agree with my values and my principles. And I need to move away at the moment to go to the garden or go make a cup of tea. And it's about breaking the energy of the moment with something which is not aggressive, and leaving that person to think about it. And then further down the line, making choices that are about what you know you need and not being controlled by somebody else. And that's true also even, of a partner, of your children, obviously of people at work, bosses, anybody, parents, our own parents. I remember one time my mother, bless her, who I love to pieces and she loved me, but we had different religious ideas, and she was critiquing something that I was doing for my children in religious area. And I just said, well, that's our decision, Mummy, and that's what it's going to be. Would you like a cup of tea? And I said it with that, like, that was the end of that conversation. I'm offering you something else. And she just went, oh, yes, dear. And I walked out of the room and I was fuming, but I was able to go into the kitchen and just say, it's okay. That's where she comes from. This is where I come from. Now, obviously, there can be some very more malicious conversations in that, but the same thing is, go back to the core. What choice are you making? What ownership do you have of that moment? And don't not say something, just make a statement very clearly with a nice big full stop at the end. Take responsibility for what you're going to do next, which is probably best to move out of the situation just temporarily, and then get your own energy back together. Go outside, do some breathing, just put some music on that you like, change your own body energy. And I can assure you that when you come back and meet that person again, there is less likely to be an angry intervention, because you've thrown another sort of aspect of life in there. But what we often try and do is to convince the person of our opinion, and then you get into a spiral, and then it can go totally off. That's my advice.
That is so brilliant, because you're right. You said earlier how important it is to meet people where they are. And if they're not able to absorb or be able to hear you neutrally and hear the other side, it's waste of time, right? Yes. It's waste of energy, and it's going to create more and more conflicts. If they're also so convicted, with strong conviction, so really already clear about their position, it's very little that it will ever change their point of view.
Well, that's exactly the thing. I would say if there was two polar opposite people, they're the same. People don't like me saying that. They're not the same content, But at that moment in time, they're exactly in the same place. And actually there isn't, I would say it's a bit, I don't believe there are truly difficult people. I think there are truly difficult situations where we get into that polar opposition and we're never going to win. So what's your option? You either keep on fighting or you look for the compromise, or you move away, but you move away with dignity. There's all sorts of options, but fighting doesn't need to be the one that we opt for.
It brings back again how we communicate, right? How do we see which lens we look at, what language we use, what level of energy charge, how do we insert ourselves, how we lean in, all of those pieces. But so interesting, obviously you're an amazing behavioralist and I love where you come from and understanding human dynamics. What I also love about you is how much you have such a beautiful global acumen, understanding, as you said, history, what brought us in evolution of the world, where we are today, what was traditionally expected and assumed, what shift happened, and how now we're trying to blend two different genders together, or just in gender, different polar opposites, regardless of the gender, together. And how do we again create a harmony? So for everybody watching and listening that wants to come out with a couple of steps to be better at it, what would you recommend?
Well, the steps are really going back to that beginning is think about who you are. You know, there's some classic things out there. You can come and see me and find out what archetype you are, but are you a very outspoken person? Do you actually observe what happens when you say things? Do people say, or do they come towards you? You know, just be aware of yourself and honor yourself. Honor yourself in a good state of being loving. And then the second step is get to know people who are not like you. It might sound simple, but get to know people who are not like you. Because people who are like you probably tune into them quite quickly, but get to know people who are not like you. Different type of women, different type of men, different generations, different cultures. I lived in Malaysia for 4 years. It was fascinating because I'd never been in a culture like that, coming from England. And now I'm getting used to America and dealing with people in Africa. Listen to people who are not like you and understand people who are not like you, and then work out where the bridge is and look for joy and harmony. And if you like, it's a bit like music. So we can't be harmonious unless we've got more than one voice. So it's more than one voice, and the voices are different. You watch a choir, they're all different voices, but they sing in unison. We need the different voices in order to make the unison, the harmony, and then we can deal with all the difficult issues of the world together.
I love that. Looking for the joy, looking for the harmony, finding common grounds, things that we can build on, not to destroy or not to point the fingers, but also finding ways to also learn from people different than ourselves. And one thing you just said prior to that also that I want to emphasize, you said you do not believe in difficult people. You believe in difficult topics, circumstances, situations. And right now we're dealing with the insane amount of difficulty when everybody's limits are being, in a way, tested and pushed. And also both of us know how important it is. Yeah, it's great to have emotional intelligence, but having emotional capacity to extend and expand and carry that. And then now social intelligence and social capacity, where we now look at what's going on around us with people socially so that we can insert, support, contribute, and make an impact. And I'm so glad you understand that, because I keep writing about it, saying all this. And I just want to ask you, if you don't mind, bring this together, because you said that this year definitely brought up a lot of element of social stretching and capacity. Yes. Do you mind sharing from your perspective, what do you see so that we can confidently go in 2023, despite the fears and all of those issues might be internally going on, to make better choices and decisions and lead harmoniously, joyfully.
One of the things that struck me as you were asking that was be yourself everywhere you go. Don't be somebody else, even though you might have different roles. You know, I'm a businesswoman, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a speaker, but I'm also a mother and a grandmother. And all of those have slightly sort of different nuances, but I aim to be myself in all of those. And that cuts out a lot of stress. Just be yourself. And yeah, I think that the COVID changed our lives completely and shifted our curiosity and imagination, our fear, everything. But this year has been particularly fearful because coming out of it, there were a lot of people not dealing with it. And there were a lot of people in authority who are dealing with it in ways that we may feel that we're not part of, let's put it that way. So again, it's about addressing yourself and being who you are in every situation. Yeah, there are difficult times, but imagine your overall mission in life. And that might be as simple as just being healthy in every moment. It might be a big mission to leave a legacy. It might be, like mine is, to make sure every leader in a company works in authentic harmony. But understand the rainbow, if you like, the rainbow which the clouds are under. So the clouds are all the stuff, you know, we get stuck into stuff. We get into these arguments about gender diversity and equality and then marginalization and violence and fear. There are so many things that we can get stressed about. Is to step back into yourself and understand what your rainbow vision is. If it's to create a better world, then we're all thinking in the right direction. We actually energize that powerful consciousness at a collective level. That's what I do with my wisdom circles, my open ones, is, you know, come and share what your wisdom is. What if the whole world could do that on a daily basis? You know, offer your wisdoms to your family, to your friends, and rejoice and be grateful for whatever the day's brought. But we are all in this together. So as well as being yourself everywhere, recognize that, you know, everybody is dealing with these bigger issues. And some of the ones that we really, really can't have an influence on yet, don't stay in them too much. I mean, in that respect, I don't watch the news. I don't involve, I know what's going on in the news, but I don't spend hours and hours absorbing it, because it has a really negative effect on us as human beings. So if we got bad news on coming in all the time, it impacts our core. We're aware, but we're not eating it.
We're not absorbing it. We're not inhaling it in a way, as you said, or eating it, because that's where it starts to create that negative toxic within ourselves, right? Poisoning us in many ways.
Yes. So, you know, we live on a planet which is, you know, amazing. Let's enjoy it and go out to it. Make sure we get some light in our day. Go for a walk. Obviously, you know, just be cognizant of that mask on you, and in little ways. So I do believe that 2023 is going to be a major transformational year. And, you know, whichever way it goes, you know who you are, and you know to be yourself wherever you are. That's the thing that keeps me going. It's that basic value cycle. Do I know myself? Do I know the people around me? Do I know the world I would like to have? That is what drives me, is to remember that only I can create the value in my life to give to others. So it has to start here.
That is so beautiful, because ultimately that's why we're working so hard, not necessarily to get the status just to be millionaires there or whatnot, but to be able to continue giving and have a more means in investing in certain areas that we see that's going to create a positive ripple effect around the world. I love that. And you already touched a little bit in this answer, but seems like with everything you've been already doing, and through your books, through your workshops, through your high profile engagement with leaders around the globe, and so many other things, you already carved, you're leaving phenomenal legacy because you chose to lead with it and also live it.
And
because And a lot of people think just what they may leave it, either just for their own immediate cluster family, but what very often they forget, you have to breathe that, you have to live it every day, and you have to also lead with it. So with that in mind, what's next in a bucket list for you that you would like to accomplish? And also, what would you like to be known and remember as your legacy?
My legacy, and interesting enough, I did an exercise 2007 writing my obituary, and about when I'm going to die in 2050, which I'm obviously heading towards now, was to actually leave the world a place that smiled, and that there would be no bullying in the workplace. So I actually wrote that in my obituary, and that's still it. It's like, I would like to eliminate negative behavior. And now the power of authentic harmony, which is the title of my book, which is going to be published hopefully in the next couple of weeks. I would like the power of authentic harmony to be as well known as any famous book, Chicken Soup for the Soul, dare I say, anything that comes to mind that people always know. I just want people to understand there's a power in the authentic harmony they can create in their life. So that's my legacy. And I would like my legacy to also, in terms of the next step, is education for creative living, really getting children to understand all the skills and all the stuff that I've learned, and to put it into their lives early, and make sure that we can actually transform the education system, because I think the education system needs transformation. It's too rigid, it's too rote. And I think COVID has asked us to change it, and we're not doing it right yet. So that if I have another step, that would be where I would like to create some influence.
That is so powerful. I love that. And I also love, because future generation, right? We want to make sure, as both of us have educator background, a future generation so much desperately need the framework, as you said, that is transformative, that is relevant not only for today, but for the future, and a very different approach.
Yes, we have to. It's already the kids are looking at life differently. When we were in Malaysia, we talked to lots of universities, and they said, universities are going to disappear, and it will happen because the children won't want to go to something that's old and past. So unless they adapt, the kids have now got access to everything that they need and their entrepreneurial spirit. We have to change the education system to align with them, not with our needs, but with their needs.
Thank you for listening to Legacy Leader Show. If you enjoyed the content and had a positive experience, then please leave us a positive rating. In addition, leave us a positive review whenever you are listening on whatever platform there might be. Make sure your friends and family also know about the benefit and value that we provide and what we have to offer. Cheers.